doing? No, we got a wireless mic right on the table for you.
All right.
Am I on? Yay! All right, I don't know where to go. How are you, everybody? Good to see you. Thanks for coming out, and at least it's not too cold. Well, yeah, it is pretty cold. Isn't it? I just left California, where it was hot and dry, as you've probably heard. Fires going all over. Luckily, where my house is, it's about 30 minutes away, which is not that safe. So I'm hoping while I'm gone, I'm hoping I go back and still have a house. It was a little unnerving what was going on there. But it's nice to be back here in Pittsburgh. I was here, last time was late 70s, 1977 or so. Happy Days had a softball team. And we would play at Major League Parks before the regular games. And we played at the time it was Three River Stadium.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And so we had a game there, and I remember, because there was a guy that I went to school with growing up in Brooklyn who was playing for the Pirates at the time, a pitcher named John Candelaria. Do you remember? Candyman. So I got to see him. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, if anybody has any questions, we could do some Q&A, and then I could expound on a few things.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Raise your hand, we'll come around with a wireless microphone.
Anybody? Any questions about the show, about other things I've done? Or have you seen me in other things besides Happy Days? Like Glee, I had a recurring role in Glee. I played the father to Emma, and did 3 episodes of that. Did a 2-parter of Star Trek Voyager, and I have some photos from that at my table. Directed a few films, independent films, and lately I've been doing what I started out doing before I was an actor, my first love was singing. And I was doing that when I was 15 years old in a nightclub act in the Catskill Mountains, which was a resort area upstate New York, singing in the nightclubs and all the hotels. And I switched gears after that summer and started getting into acting seriously, and put the music aside, but knowing one day I'd want to go back to it. I always loved the great standards, the Great American Songbook and all the jazz standards. And stuff that Sinatra did, and Nat King Cole, and Tony Bennett, and Bobby Darin was a big favorite of mine, and all of those greats. And so I'm doing it all around. A lot of my shows have been in New York and LA, but sometimes in other parts of the country. And I have a CD out called The Mostly Swinging, with this great 17-piece jazz band behind me, which is an incredible high for me. And just played at a theater in New York, and I'm doing one in LA, a show in LA in about a month at a cool club called Vibratos, which is Herb Alpert's club out there. So yeah, the singing, I've got CDs. I've got a Christmas CD as well. So if you want to come by, you can check that out. And I was going to bring some DVDs of some of the movies I directed, and I forgot. So, but we could talk about them. I did a movie. I directed a movie. It was my second film called Moolah, back in 2007, 6, 7, and really great cast. People that they were not big movie stars because we didn't have a lot of money to make the movies, so I couldn't afford the really big movie stars. But the actors were all great for the roles, and actors that you recognize. You've seen them in a lot of other things. And but there was a part for the daughter of the lead actor, and I was down to 2 girls, and I finally decided on. Everyone was wanting to go with this one gal that was in a TV show at the time, and she had a real knack for comedy. And then there was this other actress that we were considering, and I really liked the second one because I didn't feel she needed to be as comedic. And there was a real honesty about this actress. she was 13 years old, and I decided to go with her, and she was great. She was fantastic. And she's gone on, it was her first movie, and she's now very big. She's doing all kinds of big things. You know Shailene Woodley? She played George Clooney's daughter in The Descendants, and the Divergent series is the lead in that. She was just in Big Little Lies with Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon, and she's been doing all kinds of stuff. She's really, she was in, that's in my movie Moolah. It was her first film. So anyway, I've given you a little bit of a background. Anybody have any questions on any of this that I've talked about, or anything else?
You got one too?
I actually have a question.
Okay.
One of our trivia questions earlier today about you was an early 1974 movie that you were in, directed by Jonathan Demme.
Oh, right.
With Cloris Leachman and Stuart Whitman and
Yes.
the late great Jim Backus.
Yeah, and Ann Southern as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and working
Yeah.
with Jonathan Demme and such an esteemed cast?
Yeah, that was, I actually posted a photo from that on my Facebook page about a month ago. It was like in between filming, me and Cloris Leachman, and Cloris is wearing this crazy outfit, and I'm wearing, I'm like a surfer guy, so I'm wearing that outfit. That was my first movie. It was about 1975, I think it was. It was a low-budget film produced by Roger Corman's company. Roger Corman introduced a lot of big directors. He gave young directors a chance. And some of them went on to become really big, like Martin Scorsese, and I think even Coppola did a film from Ron Howard's first movie was for Eat My Dust, or Grand Theft Auto, was for Roger Corman. So, and there's been a bunch of others, and Jonathan Demme is right up there in the list. Jonathan Demme, for those who don't know, went on to direct such films as Philadelphia, Silence of the Lambs, and many other big movies, and he's a great director. And I had the terrific honor and experience to work with him. It was my first film, and it was his second film. And it was a road movie. So we were traveling around as a you know, just the cast and the crew, traveling around for about 4 weeks. So it was a very, you know, you get very tight in that kind of experience, and he was very collaborative, Jonathan, and I could tell how serious he was and intelligent that he was and how creative he was, and you know, I didn't know he was going to be, who would know that he'd go on to become one of the top directors in Hollywood, but you know, I knew that I was working with somebody special. And Cloris Leachman was unbelievable. She was, she's known to be a little bit crazy, but in a great way. And I loved Cloris and working with her. And Ann Southern, oh my God, who I'd watched as a kid she was in movies that I'd seen. She was in a lot of movies. She was a big movie star in the probably 40s, I guess. And then on television. And Jim Backus and Stuart Whitman and Linda Pearl played my love interest in. And Linda was somebody that I had known since she was 18 and I was 20. And we had worked together in New York, and then here we were cast coincidentally in this film together. So it has a lot of great memories for me for that movie.
One question about a Pittsburgh connection. You've actually worked with Jack Dodson.
Oh, yes.
He's actually from Pittsburgh. Any stories about him? What kind of actor was he to work with?
Oh, I didn't know Jack was from Pittsburgh. Yeah, Jack was great. You know, Ron Howard had worked with Jack. For those of you who remember the Andy Griffith show, he played Howard Sprague. And then they were looking for somebody to play my dad on Happy Days. And I guess his name came up somehow, and I don't remember whether Ron suggested him, I'm not sure. But he got cast as my dad, and he was wonderful to work with. You know, he had this very sort of almost very quiet in person. He was very quiet and reserved, and as an actor, he was able to bring this unique kind of comedy to that personality of his, where it was kind of a dry, it could be dry, but then it could be, just almost a little bit unexpected as well. And he had a great combination of those qualities that worked well, and then the two of us together seemed to have this really good chemistry. So I get asked about that a lot. People loved seeing us together and, trying to be funny together, doing jokes, doing our routine, He was great.
Okay, we have some questions over here. See, we warmed you guys up.
What was your funniest scenes working on Happy Days?
Wow, that's a tough one because there were a lot. I did about 170 episodes. I did the first 7 seasons, and then the show, I left after my 7th season, same year that Ron Howard left. And it went on for 4 more years after that. So to pick, my one that was funniest, that's a tough one. One episode always comes to the fore for me because it was the first episode that my character got to be really featured in. Because in the first year, first 2 seasons, my character was, at the beginning, was a real peripheral character, and then he started becoming more integral. He wasn't just the sort of a guy that Potsie and Richie knew, and it was kind of a wisecracking guy. He became one of them, and then, in the third, there were some really funny episodes. I thought the drag show episode in the first season was really funny when this guy Skizzy challenged me to a drag race, and I was like sort of scared, and then Fonzie said, "I'm going to drive Ralph's car," and that was a funny episode. And there were so many in the first 2 seasons. But then we switched to 3 camera in front of an audience. And then that was the year that I got to they had a show that featured me. And it was the episode where Fonzie discovered his motorcycle had been completely demolished. And he was out to get the guy who did it. And it turns out that I had accidentally ran it over and then panicked and backed up and went back and forward and just totally destroyed it. And then I knew he was trying to find the guy, and I was like going to leave town and run away. And there were some really funny scenes in that episode. So that one really stands out for me. But, there were so many others. Somebody brought up a funny moment. Oh yeah, somebody said that their funniest moment was, it was a funny bit where we were on the basketball team in high school. Richie was one of the regulars, and I'm sitting on the bench because I'm not a starting player. And then all of a sudden somebody got hurt, and they called me, and I had to take off my warm-up jacket. You see, I'm still in my street clothes. And I go, I never play. So he loved that. And, there were a lot of funny moments. I remember one where we were in a vault, and we got stuck in a vault, and there were some funny bits in that. So many, God, it's so hard to pick one out. But did you have a favorite?
Well, there's just so many.
I know, it's hard to pick.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just in case you had your favorite. Just in case you had your favorite, I was going to make sure everybody could hear it.
I should have brought, I have a film clips. I should have brought the video with my film clips.
I can't just run.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it's
Really hard. You don't have like I have a thumb drive that has files on it. You don't have a means to play it, do you? Next time.
Darn it.
Next time.
Question: Why wasn't there not a Potsie and Ralph Mouth spinoff?
Well, actually, it almost happened. It came very close. They came to me and Anson Williams. I guess it was somewhere around the 6th year of the show or something like that. Because we did an episode where we got an apartment together, and then we got to so many fights, and it was like an Odd Couple kind of thing, And Potsie and I just were fighting constantly. We got to the point where we drew a line down the middle of our apartment, and I couldn't go on his side, he couldn't go on mine, and it was a funny episode. So then they decided they wanted to do a spinoff, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it because you know, I was already, you know, when I first started acting, I was really more interested in doing dramatic work, and the first roles that I got when I left New York and went out to LA, the first parts I got were dramatic parts. I was not a comedian by any stretch. You know, I was an actor who I could do whatever the material is, whether it be comedy or drama. So, but I was more interested in drama, and then when I got Happy Days, you know, I became so known for that I could feel, you know, you get typecast in LA pretty easily on a show that's successful, and especially this kind of show that had a, you know, it was a little bit broader, and then, you know, it was about the 50s, and it was a little bit bigger than life. So I was concerned about getting so associated with this character and comedy that as an actor, it'd be hard to do other things. So at first I said I didn't think I wanted to do the spinoff, but then, you know, the exec producers kept talking to me about it, and I slowly kind of went, you know, started getting on board with the idea. And we even got to the point where they started casting, screen testing actresses to be, they were going to have me get married, and we were screen testing actresses. And the guys who wrote the theme song to Happy Days, they wrote a theme song for the Potsie and Ralph show. I mean, they already had the song written and everything. And then it looked like it was going to happen. And then in the 11th hour, Fred Silverman, who was the head of programming at ABC at the time, for some reason decided against doing it. So it didn't happen. And to tell you the truth, I was a little sort of surprised, but I wasn't that disappointed because I was not sure it was the best thing to do, you know. But it came very close.
A question for you right over here.
How did you start out, get into singing for an audience?
Yeah, well, when I was about 13 years old, I knew that I wanted, when I was 9 years old, I saw a movie called The Jolson Story, which was about the great Al Jolson, who was, you know, one of the great entertainers of the era from vaudeville and into the 20s and 30s, and he actually starred in the first talking movie called The Jazz Singer. And I saw the movie about Jolson, and I knew I wanted to do that, you know, and I loved that music, and I started becoming interested in all the songs from that era, and learned about all the great singers through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and the jazz singers, whether it be Ella Fitzgerald or Nat King Cole or Sinatra or whoever. And I started wanting to really do it, and I got my parents to get me into a school in New York City for singing and acting and dancing. And I was there for like a year or two, and then they picked me. They would handpick certain students that they really liked. The guy who ran the studio had put together a nightclub review we were like 14, 15, and 16 years old, and I got picked to be in it, and we got booked to be in this act that would perform in the nightclubs in the Catskills. So that's how it happened for me, from that school that I was going to.
Do you remember the first songs you sang?
Well, yeah, they were songs from almost like those, that, you know, the great, one of them was On the Sunny Side of the Street, written by Dorothy Fields and Jimmy McHugh, and then sometimes I would do, you know, some Jolson stuff like Rockabye Your Baby with the Dixie Melody, and Eddie Cantor stuff, that kind of music, yeah.
So what song are you going to perform for us?
Let's get to the next question.
I'll have to get my CD.
Yeah, there you go.
Got a question for you right here.
Can you tell us about what you did on Voyager?
Yeah, I played a character named Dr. Caden, K-A-D-A-N, and episode was a two-parter called Workforce. And he was a doctor. They had a severe shortage, a labor shortage on this planet. And he felt that the only thing that they could do was, they would basically, when people came to the planet, they wiped their memories clean, people's memories clean, and then turn them into workers because they had such a severe shortage. So he was kind of the villain, you know. I was in charge of that process of wiping people's memories and getting them, you know, turning them into workers. So it was an interesting concept. Fun character to play. You know, I loved playing sort of the villain. That was a lot of fun.
You have a question on the far side over there.
Over here.
Hello, you mentioned Al Jolson for your singing initiative, but who were some of the other influences early in your career?
On the music, on the singing?
On the acting, singing.
Oh, okay. Well, on the singing side, it started out as Al Jolson. Then, like I said, I started discovering, of course, Sinatra. Sammy Davis Jr. was a big one for me. I loved Sammy. His albums would play them over and over and sing along with him. And then Bobby Darin, who, not his rock and roll, because that was not what Bobby was really about. It was about doing the great jazz and blues and big band stuff. And I got to see him at the Copacabana when I was 18 years old. And he was fantastic, amazing. And I got to see Sammy perform live, and Frank. And I loved Nat King Cole. As a kid, he had a TV show, and I used to watch him and listen to him. I loved him. So those, but then Ella Fitzgerald and some of the, Count Basie and Joe Williams was his singer, and I loved a lot of that kind of sound. And then listening to jazz in general. On the acting side, you know, when I was young, I loved watching a lot. I did watch a lot of the comedians. I loved Abbott and Costello, and George Burns was a big favorite of mine. But then when I was really got serious into acting, it was actors like Paul Newman and Dustin Hoffman, and especially Jack Nicholson, because I really got into it around 1969-70, and that was when Jack came out with a movie right after Easy Rider was 5 Easy Pieces, which he is incredible in, and that was a huge moment for me when I saw Jack in 5 Easy Pieces, and then Easy Rider, and then everything he did after that, like The Last Detail and Carnal Knowledge and Chinatown. So, but then and Pacino and De Niro, of course, were big influences. But Nicholson was he really got it. For some reason, you know, he became my idol.
Got a question for you right back here.
Hi, so I grew up on Happy Days, and you were one of my biggest inspirations for comedy.
Oh.
And I was wondering what you did, like improvise or whatever, to make Ralph like your own character instead of just words on a page.
No, good question. You know, it was an interesting process that evolved, because at the beginning, you know, I was auditioning for the role of Potsie, and I screen tested. I had several auditions and then screen tested for the role of Potsie. And then my agent called and said, you know, you didn't get the part, but they liked your screen test so much, they want you to be in the show, and they're going to create a role for you. And, you know, it's going to be a friend of Richie's and Potsie's. And in the pilot, all it was, there was a small part of a guy named Ralph, and he had like a couple of lines in one scene and a couple of lines in the other scene. And basically he just, you know, made a few wisecracks. And they said he's into cars. You know, he's in a car club and a little bit of a jock, and that was it, you know. So he didn't have much to go on, except really the dialogue and how he related to the other guys. So in the beginning, it was really more like he was not one of their good friends. He was kind of the guy they knew, but he had a car, he had a cool car, and he thought he was really a wisecracking guy, not so much the class clown. But then what happened was, as we kept, I initially drew on people that I knew that were kind of like that, you know, that were when I went to high school, that were those kind of guys, and that's how I initially did it. But then when you talk about improv, we had a director named Jerry Paris, who was a fantastic director, and he was very inventive. He had directed the Dick Van Dyke shows and played the next door neighbor. And he would come up with ideas that weren't in the script. And when I saw that we were kind of allowed to do that, I started coming up with ideas, just thinking of things, and I don't know where they came from, but probably because I wanted to try to do something that would give my character a little more screen time, because I didn't have a lot at the beginning. So I was thinking of things, and he really liked what I was coming up with, and then that would sort of inspire him, and then we'd start feeding off each other, and we'd do things that were not in the script, and then they'd come out really good, and then the writers would get ideas from that and start writing a little bit more of that kind of stuff that I was doing, and then it started evolving so that it became more, and then I started drawing, and Jerry was so funny. He would do things that I almost used him as a model for my character. So it started becoming more and more of where Ralph was now the guy who thought he was always the funniest guy in the room, and that he was the comedian, So it kind of changed from this wisecracking guy who was kind of cool to a guy that, then they started playing up the thing about me and Potsie being nerds, and it just changed. And some of it had to do with that the writers would change. And at the end of one season, some of the writers would leave and new writers would come in, and they didn't know the characters well, so they'd write things a little differently. And it was sometimes frustrating, and to maintain a consistency for your character, because you're getting conflicting kind of things coming at you. But improv did play a role in that we came up with some of our own ideas and things. But it was never like in the middle of shooting you would improv. It was like during the rehearsal.
Got a question for you, right? Straight ahead here.
I was just wondering, do you maintain any either personal or professional relationships with former cast members?
Yeah, Anson Williams and I stay in pretty close contact. I mean, we talk to each other, usually close to once a week even, and maybe see each other, twice a month, and sometimes more and sometimes less. I saw Marion Ross just a few weeks ago at an event, and it was just great to see her. We stay in touch. Henry's been traveling a lot, but we stay in touch by email. Same thing with Ron Howard. We're so crazy busy that, maybe every 3-4 months we'll exchange an email, that kind of thing, and I'll see him once a year.
Got time for a couple more questions, but I have one. Now, you mentioned earlier the first 2 seasons were done
One camera.
Yeah, how did that change the dynamics of the show, or how it was done? I mean, going to a live audience has got to be quite a jarring experience from you.
It did change the show significantly. In the first 2 seasons, we were shot like a movie is shot. Just there's no audience, and you're shooting scene by scene, piecemeal, and you might be doing the last scene in the script might be shot first, and the first scene could be last. I mean, it's out of order, and it's just scene by scene, and they have the sets built, and you get all the different camera angles to cover. So, you might spend 2 hours on a scene and then move to another scene. And then they decided, because our ratings were pretty good in the first year. We were sort of a minor hit. But in the second year, our ratings were going down. And all the big comedies at the time were shot in front of an audience, like All in the Family, Maude, Good Times. So it was Jerry's idea to move the show. He thought we should be in front of an audience. He said he thought we had a perfect cast for it, because we had Tom Bosley, who had won a Tony on Broadway. Henry Winkler's background was theater. I had done my training as an actor. It was all more theater oriented. And Anson had done theater, and Marion had done theater. And the only person who hadn't was Ron Howard. But Jerry pushed for us to be a 3-camera show, because a lot of people said, wait a minute, you're going to lose the flavor and the atmosphere of the 50s. Because you had the drive-in, the outdoor drive-in with all the cars that we would shoot, and and when you're shooting in front of an audience where you wouldn't have those outdoor scenes and you wouldn't have that whole feeling of the American graffiti kind of feel. So, but Jerry really pushed for it, and that really had a big, and they put Fonzie's character way up to the fore. And that's in the third season when we shot up to #1. But the tone of the show had to change. It just does when you're shooting it that way. It gets a little bit bigger because you're playing almost like on stage, live to a theater, to a crowd. So the tone of the show got elevated into a little bit of a, and they brought in some of the writers that, Gary Marshall brought in some of the writers that had been working on him with the Odd Couple show. And then they kind of amped up the comedy a little bit more, and the tone changed. And if you look at the shows in sequence, you see a distinct change from those first 2 seasons to the live shows.
Great, let's do one more question, and then you're gonna be headed back to your table?
Yes.
So if you want a CD or an autograph or all that, or if you didn't have time for your question, you know where to go. Let's do one more.
Right here.
Yes, sir. You were great, and I know this is all about you, but I have
Thank
to
you.
ask, what happened to Chuck?
Yeah, and that's always been a question. Whatever happened to Chuck? It was a strange, at the end of the first season, they had him in the show as, he was Richie's older brother, and he was a jock and a basketball, freak. And at the end, I remember when we were getting ready to do the second season, one of the executive producers pulled me aside. He says, I've got to tell you what's going on. And they explained that it was a mutual decision between the actor and them, because I think the actor was feeling, at the beginning they thought, okay, the family, was one part of the show, and the friends at Arnold's were a different part of the show. But as the friends started getting more, more time, because that's the direction they started going in, all they basically had Chuck doing, he was reduced to just walking through a scene, dribbling a basketball, saying something kind of dumb, and that was it. And I think he was kind of frustrated that that's all the character was, and maybe they felt he wasn't happy, and they didn't know, they didn't really know how to increase the character in a different direction. So they said it was sort of a mutual decision that they were going to just have him go off to college, and and he wouldn't really be, the actor wasn't going to be on the show anymore.
I got one question to wrap things up. What can you tell us about the episode and the significance of Fonzie jumping the shark?
And I have a photo from that episode at my booth. Well, what happened was, and this is one of the reasons, frankly, that I left the show after the 7th season. I felt that the quality of the scripts was not at the level that they had been. There had been a real growth to the show in the first couple of years, and it was evolving, and really just, there was a standard that was being kept. And it's very hard for a show to maintain that after, say, 5 years. It's just very difficult. And I could feel it, and like I said, some of the writers we lost, and other writers came in, and I felt it was starting to go down. And I think evidence of that was this episode where they had a 2-parter. They had the family going to California, and then Richie gets, to do a screen test, and Fonzie gets challenged by the California kid, and so they challenge him to this, and Henry, they used to ask Henry, because his character was so popular, that they said, what are you good at? Let's see what we can write into scripts. And Henry had done water skiing. He grew up spending his summers on a lake, actually about 10 minutes away from where I spent my summers, near a lake. And we never knew each other. But anyway, so he was good at skiing. So they figured out a way to work that in, and they had him challenging the California kid to jumping over this thing where the shark wasn't. And I went over to Ron, and I said, because I'd been complaining about the scripts, and I said, now they got the Fonz jumping a shark. Little did I know what I said at that moment was going to become like some euphemism or whatever acronym for a phrase for when a TV show starts to go take the turn and start going down, and that's how that happens. And I think I did the show one more season after that, and then I decided that was one of the reasons. There were other reasons, but I won't go into now. That'll take too long.
Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
You guys know what to do. That was the first Q&A of the day. You guys can do better than that.
Thank you.
He's headed back to his table. There you go.
Thank you. We'll see you out there.
Keep it going. He's still here. He's headed back to his table. You like to ask a question, hang out, photo, all of that stuff. He's right out there. Once again, John Most.